Well, guys, ask you to comment one of my Q&As of whether or not you want me to do a Basel review in lieu of what's on my desk or a Q&A, and I got a 50-50 response from you. Lo and behold, I do want to do a Basel review because a lot of you guys do want to hear my opinion in regards to what transpired. Like most of you said, not a whole lot of exciting stuff out there for Basel, but nevertheless, definitely worth a mention. I'm going to start with Rolex. That really didn't do a whole lot as far as I'm concerned. Jumping right on to Rolex, I'm going to start with the new Yachtmaster. I shouldn't call this stuff new because it's an existing watch. It's a watch that already exists in rose gold, and they just now did it in white gold, a 42 millimeter. How excited am I about this particular Rolex on a scale of 1 to 10? Not a lot. I don't think this guy will be a great seller simply being because they made it in white gold. Therefore, the retail is much higher. When the rose gold came out of the gate, it was trading high. It was trading close to its retail price, and it slowly came back down again due to a higher retail price. I think the same fate, maybe even worse, is going to be waiting for this guy just because it's white gold and it looks like a stainless steel watch. It almost makes me wish they just did it in a stainless steel and called it a day. If they did that, it'd be going through the roof, you know. Sea Dweller, they did a two-tone Sea Dweller, which I actually like. I actually like a lot. Again, sort of that in between. You can't afford a gold one, can't afford a steel one because they're through the roof. Here's a two-tone. I was always a fan of two-tone watches. I've done episodes on two-tone watches. I like the overall look and feel of this watch. It works in a two-tone. Oyster bracelet, black dial, ceramic bezel. Everything about this watch works. 43 millimeter, nice size. A nice follow-up to the steel version they did with the red writing last year. Moving forward, they went with the GMT Master 2 white gold, $36,750, hefty price tag. This is not going to trade over list like its stainless steel predecessor. Great look overall. Can't say anything about this watch. I like the Pepsis. I like the history behind them. Everything about them I absolutely love. So, you know what? Why not make a white gold version? There you have it. This is one that I'm not so crazy about. So they took a Pepsi, white gold, and they put a Meteorite Dial on it, cranking the price up to $38,400. I like Meteorite Dials. In fact, I love Meteorite Dials across any watches. Rolexes, Meteorite Dials are great, but not in this watch. I think this watch is ugly, for lack of a better word. I just don't feel that Meteorite Dial works with a Pepsi bezel. That's just me. You guys let me know your thoughts. You tell me what you think. Personally, I don't think this works. It can work best in a Yachtmaster. It can work best in a Daytona. But it just can't. It just doesn't work here because one takes away from another. The whole point of the GMT Master Pepsi is that it's a Pepsi. Okay, that bezel is what strikes you on that watch. And then you slap a Meteorite Dial in between. Now your attention is diverted back to the Meteorite Dial, which doesn't get the attention it deserves. The only thing you can do with a Meteorite Dial watch is accessorize it perhaps with some diamonds, a diamond bezel. Other than that, you throw a Pepsi bezel on there, it just takes away from it. Not my cup of tea, I'll be honest with you. One thing I was happy to see, and here's another company that's doing it, is bringing back smaller size watches, and they brought back the Date 36, and they brought it back in a very grand way. Again, new dials, gemstones, etc., etc. My personal favorite is going to be the green dial. Price relatively inexpensive, $34,550, not bad at all. Great way to reintroduce an old classic, the 36 millimeter. I think it's going to help the older 36 millimeter dates go up in value just the same, but it's definitely a gorgeous combination. These green and blue dials, they're reminiscent of the old Stella dials. They're not Stella dials, they're not painted dials, but nevertheless, they're very reminiscent. They have that same look, sort of that graduated light green to dark green, light blue to dark blue. Then they did a 36 millimeter Ever Rose. This is what they just recently did in the 40 millimeter. This will be a hit, no doubt. The rose gold with the chocolate dial has been a great selling combo, pretty much on any watch across Rolex. It just looks great. And of course, they did called it an Ever Rose with diamonds. People will call this one the Rainbow Date, I'm sure. I don't know if it'll have the same fate as the Rainbow Daytona, trading at almost 3 times its retail value, but it very well may, again, simply due to the damn rainbow dial. Aesthetically, I'm not so sure. I don't know if it's the diamond bracelet that's taken away from the dial and diamond bezel once again. Maybe I would love to see that on a plain bracelet. So, Rolex. They didn't do anything that I didn't expect them to do. Rolex have been doing the same thing over and over for years and years and years. They have a core set of models. They dress them up differently in terms of dials, bezels, bracelets, change up the sizes and so on and so forth, and it works for them. It's a formula that has worked for them for many, many, many years to come, and it's a formula that's going to continue working for them for many, many years to come. And they're the only brand out there that can really continue doing what they're doing. Moving on to Rolex's little brother, as they call it, and it's been dubbed that way for years. It's going to continue being dubbed that way. We'll never get out of the shadow. And that is Tudor. So first thing I want to talk about from Tudor is obviously the Black Bay. It's been a popular model for them. They've been selling like hotcakes. People have been buying into them. They love them. They did it in the bronze. And why not do it in the bronze? Jump on a bronze bandwagon. Everybody's making bronze watches. IWC just did it. Why not make a bronze Tudor Black Bay? It'll sell like hotcakes, and indeed it will. Rolex couldn't make a bronze watch. I think if Rolex made a bronze watch, that would sort of get them outside of that norm where they make the same thing over, just dress it up differently, as I just discussed, where they can do it with Tudor. Tudor is Rolex's way to, experiment, do different things, see how it works. I'm hoping that in the future, if they see that this works for Tudor, maybe they will translate some of that stuff onto Rolexes, or maybe not. I think probably just end up doing different things with Tudor. Next one was the Black Bay Chrono. Looks like an old school Paul Newman, doesn't it, a little bit? I mean, the bracelet is slightly different, obviously. It's not exactly the same looking, but nevertheless, like the watch. I like it on the bracelet. I like it on the strap. Good looking watch. Bravo on that. The Black Bay P01. This is the one that kind of struck up a lot of attention at Basel and all over social media. People either loved it or they hated it. I absolutely love this watch. And the reason, in fact, I love every release from Tudor today is because they sort of went back and made this vintagey feel about their new models. It's based on a prototype that was developed in the 60s, and now they finally made it. It took them long enough to make it. I mean, this was proposed to the US Navy back in the 60s. I guess that never took off. But nevertheless, I absolutely love this watch. It looks like it's from 1960s, and I like vintage stuff too, so for me, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to that. When I see modern watches that tend to look like vintage watches, most of them don't do a good job. Most of them kind of like, they look like a tribute watch, but they still look like a brand new watch, where Tudor managed to actually make them look as if they're actually vintage watches. And then they went to a plain Jane, what I would call a two-tone Air King. No date, just time-only watch, and they did it at 32, 36, and a 41 millimeter. And this is just expanding their lineup a little fancier because this is two-tone. This is exactly what they did. Personally, is it an attractive watch to me? Some of them, like this particular one, is actually a bit attractive. Again, different options, different bracelets. I think they'll sell. I think they'll sell well. I mean, good-looking watch. I like the black dial, the oversized markers in the hands against the gold bezel. Definitely a good look. Gotta say, big A plus to Tudor. They came out with stuff that's different, stuff that's very vintagey-like and very appealing to me personally. You guys let me know your thoughts below. Let's talk about the next big guy. That's going to be Patek Philippe, right? Patek is another big one everybody was looking forward to, and it's sort of a mix-up between doing the same old, dressing it up differently, and coming out with some new models. And let's start with the 5520P, okay? You guys are familiar with the Home Time watch that everybody's been making fun of, saying that it looks like the Zenith Home Time. In fact, I think I talked about it in a couple of my previous episodes. Why is this watch a grand complication? See, Patek is funny when it comes to classifying their watch as a grand complication. Personally, I wouldn't classify this as a grand complication. It's the same travel time you guys seen last year, except it has an alarm, and it's in platinum. Alarm indicator. Not sure how well this watch is going to do, considering the fact that its predecessors didn't do so well, whether it's white gold, whether it was rose gold. Next grand complication is the 5070AG. We've seen this watch before. This watch has been around, and honestly, all they did here is put a black enamel dot. We've seen this design across different references from Patek Philippe before, so this shouldn't be anything other than that. It's a 5078. It is a grand comp. It is a self-winding minute repeater. I mean, I like the dial, but again, not much different here. And honestly, same goes for the 6300G, their grand complication, the granddaddy of all complications. And all they did is they put a new blue dial in it. By putting a new blue dial in it, it's going to probably make people go crazy over it. Blue dials is just deemed to be collectible. Normally it's in the platinum watch. This is actually still white gold. Will they sell? Absolutely. You have to get approved to buy this watch. So, you know the story with these grand comps. I've talked about this before as well. 5212. 5212, again, deemed as a grand complication. It's a new weekly calendar, and they did it in stainless steel with a fairly nice size. It's a 40 millimeter watch. Aesthetically, not the prettiest calendar, not something you would expect from Patek Philippe to begin with. I think this will be a good seller, and simply because it's in stainless steel. You don't often see grand complications in stainless steel from Patek. In fact, the last one they did was what, the 5960? They did on steel on the bracelet, but that was somewhat of a flop because the 5960 was just not a popular model. They made way too many of them back in the day, and they don't resell well, so the steel one suffered the same fate. This, depending on the amount of production they do, should most likely do well. Moving on to 5235, it's just the same thing with rose gold with a two-tone graphite dial, nothing crazy, no changes there. 5172G. So new chronograph, again, this is all stemming from the 5070 chronograph, which is actually really highly collectible. Then you have the 5170, now you have the 5270. Historically, their chronographs have sold, but the 5170 didn't really do all that well post the 5070s. I'm hoping that the 5172G will do better. Again, the fact that it's a blue dial and a blue strap, it's aesthetically a good looking watch. So I think this one will actually do well. 5231J, again, next version of the world time with cloisonné dial. Cloisonné dials sell, they sell well. This will sell well. Again, different movement, 38.5 millimeter case size. This will sell well. Every cloisonné dial from Patek sells and sells well. Again, of course, they came out with a few, I would call them artsy pieces. What I like about this particular one is that this is a blue mother of pearl dial, but the mother of pearl itself is actually engraved. Aesthetically, it's just a gorgeous watch. I wish it's 35 some millimeters, I think 35.8 or something like that. Again, a beautiful, beautiful latest piece. Wish they took it up to about 38 millimeters. Just my cup of tea. But as far as the way it looks, it's absolutely stunning. Another fully diamond encrusted Calatrava. I mean, okay. And they do this year in, year out, and they make pretty watches, and that's what these two are. They're just pretty watches. A slew of new Nautiluses for ladies. One thing to note is they made a stainless steel Nautilus for ladies, but still with a diamond bezel, taking the price obviously down of this particular watch. And odds are we're going to have a hard time finding any of these. These most likely will trade over list, especially the blue dial. On the men's side, 5726 Nautilus. They made a blue dial. Yay. Is this thing going to sell like crazy? Yes. Is there going to be a waiting list for it? Yes. And same fate holds the 5168. And I'm not so sure about the 5168 in white gold because, again, the price is going to be high, but because of the green strap, because of the green dial, because of the fact that it's a jumbo, I still think this thing will go over list. Just looks good, and everybody wants plain Aquanauts and plain Nautiluses, so this will sell. And then last but not least, they did a fully encrusted 24 in diamonds as a follow-up to last year when they came out with the new 24 line. I like the new 24 line. It just changed up the old one because the old 24s were getting kind of stale. So they came out with this one. And what's not to like about a fully encrusted diamond Patek? I mean, it's absolutely stunning. So will you get a discount on this watch? Absolutely, because I don't know what the retail is, but I'm sure it's fairly high. I'm going to briefly talk to you about TAG Heuer and TAG Heuer. What did TAG Heuer do? They reintroduced the Atavia. So they returned the Atavia watches into their lineup. Atavia goes back to the 60s. They're now reintroducing in various variations. And again, bracelets, straps, different color dials, etc. Good job. This is a class. There's a whole lot that TAG Heuer can go back on in terms of history, reintroducing, and they'll always do well just because there's a huge base of TAG Heuer fans out there. And speaking of which, the new Steve McQueen. For the 50th anniversary, they're doing a big, this is an iconic watch from any era, whether it's 70s, 80s, 90s, or current. Steve McQueen had a huge impact on this particular watch. And anybody that sees the TAG Heuer monocle knows exactly what that watch is. Again, it's just an icon. So this is a pretty big deal and not a big surprise for me either. Last but not least, I'm going to talk to you about the golf watch. I don't know how I feel about the introductions of technology into a high-end watch world. If you're going to get a watch that's going to track performance, track a sport, or anything else, I feel like Apple Watch is obviously the way to go because you get the most amount of apps on there. It's not limited. I happen to like the Apple operating system over that of Android, which is where all these watches sit on because Apple doesn't allow anyone else to use their operating system. Android does. The last watch I remember was the FIFA watch that they made for the last World Cup. I had an order for about 30 of them. And this was before the championship started, and then after the fact, they kind of just died down. I'm not going to get into the details, but you know, if you're a golfer, this thing does a whole lot for you as a golfer. It's a very useful tool for a golfer. It's sort of like an electronic caddy, or however you want to call this, right? I'm not going to bore you with all the details. You guys can go on their website and you can check that out. But for $1,850, you know, do you want a kick-ass golf watch that carries a kick-ass name like TAG Heuer, a high-end electronic golf watch? That's a question you guys can answer for me. I'm not a golfer, so for me this would be useless, but I can see guys getting out there and spending that kind of money on that. People that usually play golf or are into golf are usually well off enough to be able to afford because golf is a hell of an expensive sport, and we all know that, but so I think this will do well. But I guess time will show, right? Let's talk about the next brand. It's again one of my favorites that everybody loves to hate, and that is Hublot. Surprise, surprise, Hublot made a lot of new watches. a lot of new watches. I'm scrolling through this and there's a lot of new watches, right? And I'm not surprised. This is what Hublot does. Hublot does numbers, and everybody knows is they make a huge variations of every single watch. What's here to note? Well, let's talk about Ferrari, right? I answered somebody's question in the Q&A where they said Ferrari was a curse to brands, and I kind of felt the same way. The last brand was Panerai, that ended up as a closeout. GP ended up as a closeout, and now Hublot hasn't. And they did a Ferrari Classic Fusion GT model, and this, for a change, doesn't look like any other Hublot. I mean, lots and lots of changes to the design of the case here. If you want to talk about the lugs, if you want to talk about the bezel, I mean, if you look at this watch, all of a sudden, it no longer looks like every other Hublot, and I salute you for that. You can still see traces of Hublot design in these new models, and they come in various metals and finishes. Pricing-wise, reasonable. It's within reason. You have a titanium chronograph at $22,000, so if you compare that, let's say, to a Royal Oak chronograph, same type of pricing. The rose gold is that comes out actually cheaper, and the carbon is slightly more expensive. So again, prices are reasonable. More UNICO stuff, right? So they did a UNICO King Gold with diamonds. Again, we've seen this watch before, so this isn't actually anything new, it's just something else dressed up differently in a 45 millimeter. I will show you this, and that they did a sapphire case. Not too crazy about this one, a little too busy for me. I wish the whole watch was crystal, as they did with previous versions, while leaving all the Ferrari stuff. Hefty price tag, $69,000, but crystal watches have been selling, and they've been, you know, justifying that high retail price tag. I mean, if you compare that to the Richard Mille Tourbillon, which is over $2 million in crystal, you know, it's night and day in terms of pricing. More UNICO 45 millimeters, a new Italian independent watch. You guys know they did the collab with the guy that makes the sunglasses. This was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago at this point. They did a new one with this one. Again, Hublot does what Hublot does. They just make crazy looking watches, and for those that like crazy, this will definitely be a watch for you. I'm not too crazy about this one. And again, all of these are in that low 20,000 price range. You know, nothing crazy, nothing has changed in that regard. The golf watch, that's a big deal for me. I think it's a big deal in terms of complications, okay? With this thing, keeping track of what hole you're on, how many shots you're at, what your total shot is. Again, I'm not a golf guy, but I do know the rules of the sport.
Obviously, you're not a golfer.
Not only is this a useful watch if you're a golfer, but even as a non-golfer, I would wear this watch because I happen to love the way this watch looks. I mean, the blue carbon, the way the strap looks, everything about this watch, I absolutely love. I love the way it looks. Big Bang UNICO 42 millimeters. I think this is a great addition because, you know, not everybody can handle those 45 millimeter behemoths. I would rather wear the 42 millimeter because it will sit so much better on my wrist. And again, I think it's a great move. It's not quite as small as the 40 or the 39, and it's not quite as big as the 45. I think it makes these pieces accessible in terms of size. So good move on that. Love UNICOs. I'm going to talk about this blue ceramic. Crazy use of materials. Unmistakably Hublot. A GMT complication, day-night display. What's not to like about this watch? You know these straps are interchangeable, so you can put it on different strap. Your plain JM1 at $20,900, very reasonably priced. Big Bang MP11. You guys have seen this watch, the 14-day power reserve. You've seen it in various variations. There's a couple of more variations for you. On this particular model, they're doing it what they call a 3D carbon. It's just a different finish on the carbon. They call it 3D carbon. Of course, they did it in rose gold, and they dressed it up with diamonds. Big Bang Mecha 10 Nicky Jam. So this watch is all about, you know, X setting. It's all about stone setting. The whole concept behind it is Hublot showing off their ability to set stones. Everybody can set stones. Although setting stones in certain tiny parts within the watch and so on and so forth is a difficult job, but there's plenty of guys out there that can do it. In fact, a lot of these companies probably use the same companies to set their stones for them, the ones that are actually able to do all this. And here's a huge one, which is part of their high jewelry line, which I like high jewelry watches. So here's a humongous baguette encrusted Nicky Jam high jewelry. If I were to wear the watch, I would definitely get rid of that strap. I'm sorry, it just doesn't go. The watch itself aesthetically looks great, but $369,000. This will suffer the fate of not exactly selling at list, but more likely way under list. And again, a lot of these watches that I mentioned, they're all limited editions of 50, of 100, and so on and so forth. So it seems like they make a lot of watches, but most of these being limited editions, overall, it's not a whole lot of watches, which is a good move on Hublot's part. Again, let's go back to a couple of more sapphire pieces. A blue sapphire tourbillon and a red sapphire tourbillon. I like these just as much as I like the regular sapphire pieces chronograph. So why not continue a line that's already successful? They made 30 of these a piece, not a whole lot of pieces to sell. Sang Blue 2. Sang Blue came out last year and it blew up. I have clients in Asia that asked me to get me as many of these as possible because these are extremely popular in Asia, and not just Asia, they're popular all over the world. And why are they so popular? Well, look at them. That's a hell of a looking watch. Geometrically, I can't think of a cooler watch if you look at it from a geometric perspective. Everything about this watch to me screams drop dead gorgeous. The rose gold is absolutely stunning. The titanium is absolutely stunning. The smaller ones, the Big Bang Sang Blue, is a huge deal. The UNICO Sang Blue, it's gonna sell like hotcakes. This blue timepiece, I guarantee you I'll sell a gazillion of them. I don't know how many I'll get my hands on. They're only making 200. I wouldn't be surprised if it's gonna be really, really hard for me to get my hands on this particular one. Big Bang One Click. Did one with Mark Ferreira. If you want something cool, if you want something different, not an everyday watch. Again, retail price, $17,300. They made 50 in each variation. Good luck getting one of these. They're moving closer and closer towards doing what AP is trying to do and every other company is to sell out of their boutiques and not have to rely on their dealer. Unfortunately, cutting out their dealers in the process. But again, if they continue making cool, different stuff, limiting the production to each piece, and it's okay that they made 100 new watches. As long as most of them are limited editions, they'll do okay because you have to look at the overall production size for the year. Calavera Katrina pieces, beautifully designed. Again, something extremely different, something that's not an everyday watch, something that's not your first, second, or maybe even third watch, maybe something that's your fifth watch, but look at the watch. Different, beautiful. Actually, personally, I like this one best in stainless steel. Again, 39 millimeters, retails for $16,200, limited edition of 100 pieces. Big Bang Rainbows, again, we all know what rainbow pieces have done. We all know what the Daytona did and what the Daytona started. And now everybody's followed suit over the last 3-4 years. And again, it's working. The stuff does sell. UNICO Rainbow King Gold, not so sure about this one. The problem is getting a gentleman to wear a huge watch that looks like this. It's a bit problematic. The One Click Rainbow, the smaller timepiece for ladies, this will probably sell and sell well. But again, $82,000 price tag, pretty hefty. Audemars did the rainbow bezels on the skeleton Royal Oak, and then they also did regular Royal Oaks. They were all rainbow. And guess what? Whoever has them and got their hands on it, they're asking way over list. Don't think this will be the case with Hublot, but they will still sell nevertheless. Big Bang Paribas, another limited edition. Classic Fusion, AEROFUSION, Chronograph, Orlinski. This is it. This is the guy I wanted to show you. Love this watch. Love the red. In fact, if I was a Ferrari guy, I'd probably go for this before I would go for the actual Ferrari watches like I showed you earlier. $24,000. Everything about this watch is just cool as hell. There's nothing outside of the fact of how cool this watch looks and how different it is. Still unmistakably Hublot, but the red ceramic is absolutely stunning. And again, AP just did different ceramic bezels and colors for their offshore line. So they're doing the same thing. Black ceramic, green ceramic, red ceramic, fully diamond encrusted pieces, partially diamond encrusted pieces. Everything about these watches just is cool as hell to me. I think this will be a great seller. I can't wait to get my hands on one of these just to see it in person and see how it sits on a wrist. Of course, different complication variations. They made a sapphire one. Look at this guy. This is also a tourbillon, full sapphire tourbillon. The way they depicted this picture, you can actually see the lettering coming through from the back of the watch. I don't think that will be the case once you get the actual watch, but because they made this look pretty much glass. 5-day power reserve tourbillon, $137,000. Heck of a lot more reasonable than some of the other sapphire complications that are out there today. Spirit of Big Bang, probably their worst seller. They're still keeping at it. They're not being discouraged, and they're trying to do it in the big way by making beautiful complications. Look at this blue tourbillon in carbon. It's a gorgeous watch. And no, it's not a Richard Mille wannabe. No, it's not. This is Hublot going outside the box, making something different. And they haven't had a whole lot of success with these in the past, but I'm hoping with the introduction of things like these, perhaps that will pick up. Yellow sapphire, blue sapphire, various ladies pieces. Again, more or less plain Jane, just a whole lot of diamonds everywhere. But price-wise, let's compare King Gold White Pave, for example, right? Let's say if I compare that to a ladies Royal Oak with just a diamond bezel, this retails for less than the standard Royal Oak with just a diamond bezel, and this has a whole lot more diamonds on it. And again, it's a decent looking watch. I mean, I would take a Royal Oak over this. Again, not a big fan of the Spirit of Big Bang. Nevertheless, I take my hat off to them for continue at it, not quitting, moving forward, and adjusting to see how they can improve that particular line. That pretty much covers it for Hublot. Again, a ton of new models, but not a huge production. A lot of them being limited editions, a lot of cool stuff on there. I encourage you to go onto Hublot.com and check out the rest of these models, and hopefully slowly but surely we'll start getting some of them in as well. So guys and girls, in conclusion, I mean, obviously I didn't go over nearly even 5% of all the watch brands that display in Basel, and there's a lot of jewelry guys there as well. Those of you who've been to Basel, you know how huge that show is in comparison to, let's say, SIHH. But I felt like I wanted to touch upon the brands that I mentioned that at least I care for most, to see what they've come. I mean, I didn't talk about brands like Zenith. I didn't talk about Bell & Ross. I didn't talk about smaller brands like Alpina, Arado, Citizen, or even Casio. There's plenty to talk about if I were to go through literally brand by brand, starting with the high-end brands and finishing up with the lower-end brands. And by lower-end brands, I mean price point-wise, not to make them sound any less worth than the big boys. It would just take forever. Comment below, let me know your thoughts. Other than that, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll see you next time for more watch reviews and other videos.